And the battle lines are really getting drawn in a big way as it pertains to Ron DeSantis against Joe Biden, the decisions made by the governor of Florida versus the decisions being made by Dr. Fauci and others in the Joe Biden administration. And so, as we went to break, I was talking about the fact, and I know, Buck, your brothers have spent a lot of time in Florida. We've got a monster audience in the state of Florida. We appreciate all of you. We know a lot of you have traveled down to Florida to get away from the draconian COVID restrictions that may have existed in your states, especially if you're on the East Coast or in the central part of the country. I'm headed down to Florida tomorrow. My wife, I almost blew the number here. I think our 17th wedding anniversary. And so congratulations to her on being able to last that long with me, which I think no one really anticipated. But we've got a place in Rosemary Beach, Florida, down there right on the Florida Gulf Coast. We spend a decent amount of time down there. In fact, when everything got locked down last year, we spent the month of May. Our kids were out of school. We just relocated and went to Florida for the month of May and lived a normal life. Ron DeSantis is under siege because he represents the last best hope right now of everyone out there who is trying to live a normal life, kids in school, sports going on, normalcy in America is represented right now by Florida. And if Florida falls in line with the New Yorks and the Californias of the world, then there suddenly is no control group to be able to compare COVID responses. Because right now, you look at the data, Buck, if you compare, let's say, Florida and Texas with New York and California, what you see is that the data reflects Florida and Texas have done a better job of managing COVID, both from a health and economy perspective, than New York and California have. But if Florida goes down and if they start masking and if they start restricting, which is what the White House wants, and I'll play Jen Psaki here, then there is no control group to be able to point out how much this is different and how little some of the responses matter. And suddenly we spiral into Australia. Play cut 8 here, Jen Psaki on DeSantis.
Our war is not on DeSantis. It's on the virus, which we're trying to kneecap. And he does not seem to want to participate in that effort to kneecap the virus, hence our concern.
There you go, Buck.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He doesn't want to participate. He doesn't want to fight back against the virus. The things these Democrats say are so stupid and so dishonest at the same time. On MSNBC, they have people theorizing as though they're being brilliant, that DeSantis doesn't care about children dying. All he cares about is MAGA, right? All he cares about is what the base tells him. And you reach this point where you just say, there's something, and I mean this, emotionally and psychologically wrong with people that not only will say that, but will believe that. Obviously, right. Ron DeSantis doesn't want anyone to die from COVID. And beyond that, the fact that we even have to say this out loud, Ron DeSantis has done a better job than the comparable states run by Democrat governors throughout this. But here's the thing, Clay. They know that not only is DeSantis a challenge for the COVID control that they want, right? Not only is Florida this outlier as a major state, but beyond that, he's a challenge to the entire Democrat power apparatus for Biden or whomever's reelection effort in 2024. And so they're throwing everything they've got at this guy. They used to lie about the data sometimes. Remember there was the woman, I forget, Rebecca Jones, I believe, who would just make stuff up out of their hiding data. It wasn't true at all. And now what they're doing is they're just trying to focus in, drill down on Florida and get essentially local officials to defy state. Can you imagine if Fox News, let's say, or if some if we here on this show were advocating for cities in the state of New York to defy the state quarantine guidelines or mask mandates or whatever, people would have said that's lawlessness. That's nullification. That's exactly what they're doing in Florida right now, because it's never about what's right or what's fair. It's just about what they want and what gives them power.
And imagine how much different our COVID response would have been if Andrew Gillum, who only lost, I think, by 30,000 votes in 2018, had ended up losing to DeSantis, he would be running Florida right now, assuming that he was still in office and he hadn't had his ridiculous, sex scandal that he had back around the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly. It would be a total mess. And what they're trying to do now is they are trying to use COVID to beat Ron DeSantis in 2022, because they know if DeSantis wins re-election in Florida in 2022, next year, he is going to be one of the top contenders for the White House, and I don't think there's anybody that the Democrats could run against him. He'll either be, maybe, Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate. I think there would be a good chance of that happening. Or if Trump decides to sit out the election, I think Ron DeSantis would have to be the substantial favorite to be the standard bearer right now if you were buying stock in someone who was going to be elected in 2024, not named Donald Trump in the Republican Party. I don't think there's any doubt you'd have to go with Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I mean, you could throw some other names in the mix. I actually think Mike Pompeo has more of a path and higher aspirations than often gets talked about. But nonetheless, what we're seeing here in Florida, Clay, is the all-out effort to just convince. They just have to get DeSantis to do what Texas did. Because that was the problem with Texas. Governor Abbott initially went along with the mask mandates and the closures, and it wasn't until what felt like the DeSantis miracle had occurred, where you had a state that stayed open and gave sort of safe harbor for those who believe in freedom and living relatively normal lives during the major wave of the pandemic, the initial waves of the pandemic. Now you had Texas come out of it, but here, I mean, the Austin, Texas Mayor Steve Adler talking about masks in schools.
The choices that people are making not to get vaccinated for themselves are not choices just for themselves. The choices that they're making to leave themselves more vulnerable for ending up in a hospital is impacting everyone. That's why it's important to especially protect our children. A parent can make a choice for their child, except that the choice that they make impacts everybody else in the classroom. And people should have a right to pick a choice to be able to be in a classroom that keeps their children the most safe. And we're going to do everything we can. We're going to, as we said from the very beginning, we're going to follow the doctors and the data, even when we have a governor that seems to be following the donors and not the doctors.
This is the favorite talking point of totalitarian morons all across the country. We're not infringing on your choice. We're just following the data, as though they're not making a subjective judgment and often making predictive judgments about what that data tells them and suppressing contravening ideas or contradictory theses about what's really happening.
What's frustrating to me about this, and I want to play, because this is emblematic of where we are. Let's play. I don't know how many of you guys have heard this, but let's play cut 5. Oklahoma Public School Board member Linda Sexton in Norman, Oklahoma.
No relation.
Did you hear what she said?
No relation.
I think this is Buck's mom. Buck's mom is on the school board.
Take that back there, Travis. This is a fighting word, son. Back yourself up. I've never. There's no relation. This Linda Sexton lady.
Linda Sexton, the black sheep of the Sexton family. She's on the Oklahoma Public School Board in Norman, Oklahoma. This is crazy. Listen to what she said. This is not data. This is not science. This is not in any way being rational. These are who we are fighting with now. Listen to Linda Sexton.
It's just not okay for kids to commit murder by coming to school without a mask. And when it comes down to it, it's possible. They will cause a death of another child because they come to school without a mask.
Murderers!
It's possible you're going to cause a car accident. Every single time you get into a car, you might kill somebody by accident. So you're a murderer, Clay. I mean, we have seen people now get so crazy, so hysterical that the basis of common law, of natural law, of morality, these people have they're completely unmoored. They have no way of connecting with reality around them. You're a murderer if you go in?
It's a level of madness. And I just want to keep hammering home these data points because I think it's significant. 40,000, and again, you always have to say this. I used to say on my sports talk radio show, Buck, nobody hates death more than me. I hate death more than anybody on the entire planet because people will say like, oh, you don't care about grandmas. Oh, you don't. Like, I wish everybody lived forever. Okay. I am more in favor of immortality than anybody you've ever heard. I don't want anybody to ever die. This is a very brave stand
you're taking against death and against the Grim Reaper. We might lose some Grim Reaper listeners, Clay. You're a brave man.
I hate death more than anybody who has ever talked on the radio in the history of the world, all right? But data matters. And we can't stop death. The worst death of all is young children dying, right? And we have the data that 40,396 kids under 11 years old died in the past year. That's a tragedy for all those parents. That is an unbelievable, incredible difficulty, right? We wish that did not happen. But part of being an adult is recognizing how to assess risk. It's a huge part of being an adult. 40,396 people under 11 died since the start of 2020. Fewer than 200 of them are from COVID. That means if you are a kid out there, or you have kids, I think these are important data points to share with kids. I have to try to make them understand risk. There is a 99.5% chance that the kids who have died in America in the last year have died from something other than COVID. What percentage of the time that we have talked about kids have we spent focused on those under 200 deaths from COVID?
It's
more, by the way, mostly, seasonal flu deaths.
It's mostly not about protecting kids. It's hysterical adults who are terrified that they'll get infected by the kids who are demanding this stuff. It's the soy drinking, CNN watching, latte liberals who are, even after double vaccinated and double masked, they're worried that if they have to go into school or if they're near children somewhere, because remember, kids can't be vaccinated. So it's actually mostly hysterical adults, I think, that are the ones that are insisting that children be masked up. Because they can't actually, no one can look at those numbers. It's impossible to look at the numbers you've cited and say that you're really worried about kids from this. Although they're trying to run these stories about pediatric ICU. Pediatric ICU wards are very small in terms of beds for good reason, obviously. So when they say, oh my God, that's 100%, well, if you went from 6 cases to 12 cases, yeah, that's bad, as we've discussed, as a tragedy.
They're also run, Buck, to be always near 100%. It would make no financial sense for a hospital to have an ICU ward that is only 25% full. Like, they are run to be near capacity at all times.